Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. I'm Sarah Vantine here with Ted Ings. Today we have Kaylee Felio of PartsEdge. And Ted, lots of conversations in the industry today around parts best practices.
Kenley, it's always top of mind, but maybe never more than right now. Welcome back to the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Thanks for all you do to put parts on the radar. I've never seen such an appreciation of parts, and I know we've had many discussions over the years, but this really is the year of the parts department. People are focused on it, and people are getting excited about parts. Kaylee, I've never seen that, but it's happening now.
It's funny you say that because it's been such a whirlwind of looking back and seeing all the how the conversations are changing and just actually seeing dealers and general managers getting involved in the conversations is just huge and really rewarding to see. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
We've had the discussion about obsolescence a couple times before. And, as you and I, and we talked about in the green room, sometimes a dealer or a manager may say, I've got that problem solved or licked. Do they really? Okay. Because isn't that something we have to keep on top of consistently every day, every week, every month, and not just once a year? And talk to us a little bit about that because you help dealers not in buying their obsolescence, but in coaching them and to make them aware of things they need to do every day to make sure it's not gonna be an issue later. Speak to us about that.
Yeah, I always say like we work on stopping the bleeding, especially if it's a huge obsolescence problem. And a lot of times, the parts managers we work with did inherit. There's someone who retired or just, I don't want to say bad hire, but just, bad process, whatever. A lot of times it is inherited. And it's a lot to come into an operation and that be on top of all the other things you have to focus on. And then to
Mm.
have that like thing on your shoulder, that giant obsolescence issue. Because the other thing I think that isn't realized is that someone takes over and they have all that obsolescence, it's going to keep on aging. There's going to be like those bad
Mhm.
mistakes for 12 months ago. They're going to keep on aging. And then they're going to be like, why is it growing? It's like, well, it's growing because it's continuously aging. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that's a huge frustration. I think that happens because of the disconnect with like a GM looking at the numbers and the parts manager's like, I'm not buying this stuff. It's just aging. So I rambled, but yeah.
Well, Kaylee, it is a very relevant topic, and one of the areas that we see it across the industry. So there's a lot of purchasing of dealerships happening. There's a lot of entities and companies that are buying other dealerships, and in between the process of acquiring new stores and switching systems and looking at different things, that's a common area where we see obsolescence sneak into the equation. So what best practices do you see? To like, as you mentioned, this is something as time marches on, it just keeps compounding and aging. But what are some of the best practices from the setup to be prepared for when you're taking on a new dealership or a new parts department if you're just coming to work for a new organization?
Well, I know that in a lot of those negotiations, you can negotiate with the manufacturer on getting rid of that obsolescence. So I think that's the first step is like figuring out how you can, get all that data and then figure out what is actually obsolete and negotiate that into the deal. And then if that doesn't happen, then it's really just knowing what that number is and knowing where that data is and putting into place especially with the amount of migrations happening with or conversions I should call it to new DMSs it's increased so much over the last couple years. And that's another thing that happens is like the setups of a DMS were set up by maybe two managers ago or wasn't even really reviewed, and the DMS providers just copy over, and it's not really their fault, they just copy over what was set up. So I
You're
think
right.
that's
Right.
sorry, go ahead, Ted.
You're right. You're exactly right. That's what happens. It gets handed down, and who set that up? It was set up a while back by somebody else who's not even here anymore.
Yeah, and it creates this lack of trust in the system. no one really knows. Like I'll talk to some parts managers where they do have 30 sources, but they're only using 5 because they're not quite sure. And it's like, to take the time to really go through that is not something I think that should be expected of a parts manager. I think it's a lot more, there's a lot more layers. It's almost like an onion. There's a lot more layers to it than it as simple as just like, oh, let's just set this up and hope it works. It's There's a lot of layers to it.
Well, and Kaylee, another element in this equation, I've heard a little bit of debate about what an acceptable percentage of obsolescence is. And I don't know, share with our audience today, because again, we have a mix of people from general managers to dealer principals. We do have, fixed operations and of course parts managers listening too. But let's start there. What is, a typical obsolescence percentage, and how do you really effectively know that that's the correct metric for your business?
Oh man, that's such a big, like, good question. So I'm going to say that the goal should always be 0. But is that realistic? It can be achieved, right? Like there are some dealerships we work with, GM, there's some Chrysler ones out there that they maintain a very, very low percentage. They work very hard at it. But I think realistically, it's not a broad number. I think it depends on the manufacturer because there are different manufacturer programs. There's different auto stock
Mhm.
replenishment programs. Honda doesn't have one. Toyota doesn't have one. Toyota, you can send pretty much anything back under $8. So like that's more realistic. You can't just set this broad. I think historically NAD has always said like what 11, 10, 12% I think is the goal. We like to shoot for 0 because it's like, come on, but the other question we should be asking ourselves is how how much is enough to be writing off? Because I think that some dealerships,
Mm.
even the bigger ones, are like,
Mhm.
we're just going to write it off at the end of the year. It's whatever. We take the hit.
Hmm.
What if you could write off half the amount? Like that's what you should be asking yourself. Why is it this like, oh, it's what we always do. We just always write it off. Um, so I think I hope I answered your question, but I've seen like the GMs, the Chryslers of the world, um, 20-ish, 25% is realistic.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
but I don't want to put that number out there because it's like you should be shooting for 0 and you can't achieve it. The other big component too is with those manufacturer programs is really looking at your protected inventory and your non-protected inventory. You have a lot more non-protected inventory than I think a lot of dealerships realize. And that's really where you have to focus on the obsolescence and the inventory. So
So,
Well, and
Kaylee, here we are. We're in the middle of the second quarter. We're still in May. But what do dealerships need to be doing today and every day so that at the end of the year we're not having this big obsolescence discussion and worrying about it then? What are the things that we need? Because I think the key to everything in life is going to be consistency and balance and doing things day and keeping an eye on things every single day, not letting it build up. What are some of the Sarah mentioned best practices, but what are some of the things that you see that better dealers are doing, to keep that obsolescence in check so that we don't have a problem later?
the best parts managers have the best control over their special orders. That's your number one
Mm,
cause of
mm,
obsolescence. Um, along
okay.
with there's like 5 main causes, but the best ones I see have a really good process on staying on top of special orders. Their shelf is organized, clean, they know what's going on. So I think that's the biggest thing without having to like add new technology or do something crazy. It's like look at your special orders. The other thing, with our clients is just giving those detailed reports on a consistent basis. So like having access to your non-controlled inventory or non-rim, non-arrow. I'm just kind of throwing out the terms because I think everyone thinks of them differently, but your non-controlled um, returnable parts, staying on top of that. A lot of manufacturers have like a 60-day return where you pay a percentage, but you can send it back. And then like I had mentioned the special orders, we classify it as forced stock. So nothing that met your best stocking level that is in your system. So getting that detail to your parts managers to review that on a consistent basis, really just kind of it's not just as simple as just looking at a report and your obsolescence. You have to look at a lot of components.
Hmm.
So that's where I'm just kind of highlighting like the reports that you have to look at on a consistent basis. That should help.
Maybe not as easy as the used cars, right? Which is you know, a bigger number and sticks out a little bit more, but this is, you know, this is the inventory you need to keep track of and Sarah, be watchful of, you know, throughout the year, especially now as we come into the end of the second quarter and now into summer and so on, Sarah.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, Ted. It is a big number, but a lot more skews, right?
Yeah.
Like I always say, like we make anywhere between 200, 300 changes to a system every single day. And those are like individual parts. You know, you times that by 30, that's a lot. There's just a lot of data and a lot of parts rather than like a used car that's big and sticks out. So that's a good point.
Sarah, I'm thinking also some of our dealer friends who are watching have gone through DMS changes this year and in the last year where they like literally changed the DMS that they're on, right? And Sarah, I'm wondering if you know that's also a red flag, you know, when it comes to my parts inventory and being able to be aware, Sarah, of what I'm stocking.
No, you're so right, Ted. And there's little nuances between, as Kaylee pointed out, you can't just simply rely on the reporting methodology that's handed to you. There's a lot of nuances in all of these different reports, and you can have in DMS systems 10, 15 different reports with slightly different names and get completely different data because it's
Mm.
looking at tiny little nuances in the difference of how the logic of that report is being crafted. And Kaylee, this is a more important topic than ever for parts departments, and PartsEdge is right at the center of helping dealerships with these best practices.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible to see, and um I love what we can do for parts managers. And I always like to say, because I hate saying it's just about reporting, but it really does make a difference. Because if you think about having to pull 5 different reports and then become an expert on Excel and how to, you know, compile and, you know, convert, I don't know the right terms, but there's a lot of parts managers out there doing a great job at it, but that's a lot to do regularly. So simplify it.
A lot happening. Kaylee, you put the focus on parts for the audience watching. If they want to reach out, because you got a lot of resources. You know, we know that you've cornered the market on the podcasts, okay, and on the video conversations and audio conversations and parts. But you've got other resources. You've got ebooks. You've got things that a lot of dealers may not be aware of. What's the best way for our audience to reach out and find that that library of resources that PartsEdge has got and how you can help them?
Yeah, it's our website. So go to partsedge.com.
Okay.
We have so many resources. So we have a parts manager quiz. You can figure out what type of
Mhm.
parts manager you are, and you get a tip sheet based off that
Um,
quiz. We have our ebooks. We do webinars every month. And then I have the podcast where I feature the webinars, but then I also have kind of those, you know, individual conversations about the industry. So I'm doing a lot of different areas, but it seems to be really well received, and a lot of people are getting a lot out of it. So we're just going to keep on doing it. The last few webinars, just to shout them out, last month we did monthly reconciliation. So we provided
well,
reconciliation forms for per DMS provider. We go over matrix pricing and gross all the time. That's like, well, every 3 months. I feel like we cover that, and then we talk about just inventory control. You know, those types of things. So just to shout out some of the topics.
all right. Sarah, it's an exciting time for fixed ops and especially for parts right now.
It is, Ted and Kaylee Felio. Thank you for sharing your expertise with our audience today. And Ted and I are looking forward to unpacking even more best practices at future roundtable events.
Thank
Kelly,
you.
thank you for all you do. Kelly Phil, everybody, the sales and marketing manager at PartsEdge. Visit them on the web at partsedge.com. You see Kelly's email scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Kelly Felio here with us today at the Fixed Ops Roundtable.